Welcome, welcome, welcome back to Dialogues with Death with your host, Chris Miller. Hi, good morning, Chris.
Good morning, everybody. Good to see you, Mary.
Good to see you too. Hey, it's December 1st, and today we're
Yes.
talking about celebrations of life, or I should
Yes.
say, what happens when someone dies in your life. I've got tons of questions for you today, Chris.
Okay.
Everything from what's the difference if someone you love is in hospice versus if they were died in a murder scene. So we're
Sure.
going to talk about homicides. This show today is going to be super exciting.
All right.
Anybody watching, if you guys have any questions, please put them in the comments and we'll answer them during the show. If you find this interesting, please share it with your friends. And without further ado, let's get into the first question, Chris. So
All right.
again, we're talking about celebrations of life, and
Yeah.
people have different ways that they celebrate life. So what are some of the unique ways that people have honored their loved ones in your experience?
Sure. Throughout my many years, and all the families that we've served, we always try to, when we're sitting down with our families, is to talk about their loved one of remembrance and giving them something to make each funeral experience special. And so when we're sitting down doing our consultation, we're like, hey, what are some hobbies that they have or things that you would like to memorialize your loved one? Uh, I remember one time we had a family, it was their grandmother passed away, and she was a wonderful baker. And she loved, especially around the holidays, she had all these special cookie recipes and stuff. So at her at her memorial service, at her funeral, the family put together all of grandma's favorite recipes
Oh,
and they put them all together for all the family and friends, and they distributed that as part of the memorial program. And it was a booklet of about 10 to 15 recipes that everybody got. And I've actually still have, I kept her recipe book because her sugar cookies were amazing. And so I still use it today for my holiday sugar cookie recipe is her recipe. Her name was Veda, and we did her funeral like 20 years ago, but I still use her sugar cookie recipe today.
that is so cool. And I'm sure
Yeah.
all of her family members do the same thing. What a beautiful remembrance. That is
Yeah.
really cool.
Yeah.
So now, since obviously you deal with a topic that not very many people want to talk about, but it's
Yeah.
inevitable, right? Death and
Yes.
taxes. So we can try to prepare even ourselves. But if we have a loved one that's maybe they're terminally ill, they're on hospice, we know
Sure.
it's coming because there's obviously different ways to plan if you know it's coming or it's not. So let's start with if you know someone in your life is going to be passing soon, like they're on hospice. What is something
Yeah.
that you can do to help prepare not only the person and tell them about it and help them with that,
Yeah.
but also prepare for yourself?
Yeah. When you get down to the final stages of life and your family comes together, when they actually pass away, it's so hard to make so many decisions. And if you have the time to plan ahead of time, and you can also talk to that person because most people say, "Oh, keep it simple. It's not about me, and I just want a simple ceremony." But everybody wants to be remembered, and everybody wants to have a celebration. But so when somebody's on hospice, it's always important to have the family come around and share your thoughts and of what you're wanting to do for your service and your final wishes. And it really helps relieve the burden, and it helps the family stay on track because sometimes if families don't communicate, they never know what to do. And so then they're like, gee, I guess they wanted this, or they wanted burial, they wanted cremation, they wanted a service.
And it
And
causes friction, right? Because
it
when you
causes a
don't
lot of
understand,
friction,
yeah, because people have such strong opinions. By the way, we do have somebody
causes a
watching the
lot of
show.
anxiety too.
We have somebody watching the show, John, who's part of your team, right? They
Yeah.
provide Homesteaders Life Company. I love that. Thank
Yeah.
you for being here, John. And if you have any questions or think
Morning,
it's a
John.
interesting topic, please put it in the comments. I love that. Um, anyways,
Great.
I apologize if I cut you off. So you're right. So if someone is near the end of their life, it's a really good idea to have the family either with the person because they might want to plan their own funeral, or everybody
Yes.
go out to coffee and like just talk about it. Like, is there
Just
anything that you have
everybody.
that would help with that? I'm sorry.
That's
We
right.
have a delay.
Everybody should put their 2 cents in. There's especially if you have a larger family with multiple brothers and sisters or children. It's important that everybody gets to express themselves on how they want to handle their grief and that inevitable loss of their loved one. So coming together, planning is so important. And when somebody is passing away on hospice, you have that time to share, you have that time to come together, and you
Yeah.
can really put together a very thoughtful ceremony and a very thoughtful end of life service for someone.
I love that. When my mother
Yeah.
was on hospice, and I remember I was on my way to a client meeting, and I saw her every day, but I just happened to like take the morning off to actually do some business. And I
Yeah.
was driving along, and my mom calls me on my cell phone, and I'm like, "Oh, I'm just heading to a client meeting, but I'll be coming to you after." And she goes, "Oh, good, because I really want to plan my funeral today." And I was like, "Oh, like I,
Oh,
I wasn't
catch
in
you off
that
guard.
mindset, yeah, right." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And she's like, "Yep, I know what flowers I want, what songs I want sung. I know that." And like she was going, and I go,
Yeah.
"Mom, can we talk about this when I get there?" Like, and I missed my exit on the freeway because I was like, oh, I went into planning mode, right? And so, but it was
Yep.
really cool that she knew what she wanted,
Yep.
and
And it's so
it gave
important.
her comfort.
Yep.
Yeah. So
Wonderful.
that's awesome. And do you have like a resource that people can go through, kind of a checklist that they could bring to mom or grandma or aunt or whatever?
We do. We have a little booklet that we have in house that we when families come in. A lot of times, when somebody's put on a hospice program, typically the hospitals will let the family know, "Hey, you need to inevitably start to prepare and start to plan." And so they'll families will typically walk into the funeral home getting some price information, and we'll give them a little booklet, a little
Oh,
guide
cool.
of questions of things to fill out. And because there are some things that we need to get together prior to that time. So if they
Right.
came in and give us all the vital information and some authorization signed, it helps that transition at the time when that person dies to to continue the process without any being held up in anything.
Right. That's a really,
Yeah.
really good idea. I love that. Okay, so we talked about hospice, so you obviously have a little bit of time to plan. At least you
Yes.
know what's coming. But what if something happens tragically? Someone's in a car
Sure.
accident, or God forbid, they're in a crime situation. Like, tell me,
Sure.
let's get like detailed about this because people are interested. Like, what happens in that situation?
Yeah. And that's always unexpected for families. You never know if, when our time is going to happen we may not be here today or tomorrow.
Right.
And that happens. And sometimes we'll have families walk in and or they'll call us on the phone and they're hysterical. They said, they just lost their loved one. It could have been a homicide or car accident tragically.
Oh my
And
gosh. Can you
they're like, what
imagine?
do we do? Where do we turn? And so, we ask them to come in, we sit down with them, we kind of go over a little of the process of how we need to get going. Most likely, their loved one had been taken to the coroner's office, and so they're going to be held for some sort of investigation prior to them being released into our care.
Wow.
So we need to talk to the family about that, getting those authorizations. So it also kind of holds things in a suspense for a few days because since the county coroner has to do their investigation, it's going to be on hold for a few days. So we do have a few days for the family to come together, kind of put things together, kind of come to the realization of the loss, and then start getting them through that process. And
Right.
then we also let them know that if it's a tragic accident like that, there are programs here within our county and our state. It's called Victims of Crime that can help the family because typically if someone is dying, you can kind of plan for it and you can kind of set some funds aside or you've done a pre-need and you're kind of prepared for it. When it's sudden and tragic like this, it's a violent crime, our state will come forward and assist a family with a grant to give them to help pay for a portion of the funeral services.
Oh,
And we'll and
really?
we'll yeah, and we'll help the family. We'll get that ball rolling for them. So if they elect to choose Thomas Miller Mortuary as their funeral provider, and we put everything together, once we have a funeral contract put together, then we can help submit that for the family to the county and
Wow.
get a reimbursement, a partial reimbursement. They don't pay for the whole funeral,
Right.
but it'll just be a portion of helping them out.
Wow, I didn't even know
Yeah.
that. Well, that's really
Yeah.
handy. So you help with that. That's wonderful.
Yes, we
And
do.
also, I've read so many testimonials about your staff in all your locations, how kind and patient they are in this
Yes.
time of need. And so that's really nice that people can be really comforted. You mentioned something really quickly. You use the word pre-need, and that's not something that people normally hear about. Tell me
Sure.
what pre-need is.
So pre-need or pre-planning, it gives families the opportunity to put basically all their wishes ahead of time. So what we'll do is they can sit down with one of our directors or one of our pre-planning counselors, and basically put down all their wishes. They can pick out all the types of merchandise, such as a casket or an urn. They can pick out their programs. They can choose their flowers and their music. So it gives them the
Wow.
time of putting all their wishes down. It
Yeah.
also gives them the opportunity to pay for it. And if they can pay for it, they can lock it in at
Right.
today's price, and it can save their family thousands of dollars over years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Because a pre-need usually like it's like little installments, kind of like the
Yep.
old days. You had a layaway plan, like at
Exactly.
Sears. Remember that?
That's right.
And so you're doing a layaway plan, knowing, I mean, again, we're all going to pass.
Yeah.
Then, like within 5 years, it's all paid off, and then that money
Yep.
sits like in a secure location,
Yep.
like an insurance policy. And no
That is
matter
correct.
where they are, you were telling me something like, what if they're in Alabama or they moved to Alabama, but they've done their pre-need here? Like, what happens with that?
So how that works is when a family takes a pre-need out through Thomas Miller Mortuary in our company, it's the services and the merchandise are guaranteed at today's price, no matter if they pass away 10 or 15, 20 years from now. But say you move and you move back to the Midwest, you can take your policy and you can transfer it to the funeral home across the country. And then it's up to that funeral home how they want to receive it. They can receive it and as a guarantee, just how we do it, and not
Okay.
charge the family anymore with just
Okay.
a few cash advance items, or they could just take the dollar amount. So they could take the policy and say if it was like a $5,000 funeral plan policy,
Okay.
they can just take that plan and take it to the other funeral home, and then the company would pay that funeral home that amount of money, and then the
Okay.
family would just have to pay the difference.
Okay.
So
You
either
just
way, it's a win-win.
That's awesome. You just said cash advance. What is
Yeah.
that specifically?
Cash advance items are items that are outside of our funeral home. So our funeral home contract is broken down into three categories. We have
Okay.
our services that we provide. We
Okay.
have the merchandise. Merchandise is such as caskets, urns, headstones, memorial programs. And then the cash advances are all the items that are outside the funeral, such as flowers, limousines, escorts, death certificates, balloon releases, dove releases, anything that's outside, but we'll help the family coordinate all those and put it onto
Awesome.
one funeral contract. So they're not having to run around writing a bunch of checks, making a bunch of orders. We'll coordinate all that for them and take care of all that.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
What a relief. Because
Yes.
I've experienced in a lot of funerals, and not every funeral home does that. And it's such a pain in the butt in a time when you are so stressed out. You're literally walking around in a fog.
Yeah.
And so the fact that you guys take care of all that and just coordinate and it's done.
Yep.
That's awesome, Chris. That is awesome. Okay, so some other questions that have been written in is
Yes.
if you this kind of goes to the question you just answered though. If you plan your own funeral, if you want to plan your own funeral, where do you start? So you kind of answered that, but what would
Yeah.
somebody do?
There's a couple ways. I would say a family is typically going to call the funeral home. We put out kind of little mailers and feelers throughout the year, kind of just prompting people, hey, have you thought about planning and preparing your funeral services? Because again, someday you're going to need it.
Yeah.
So typically it has to be a call from the family. They need to initiate it. We're out there just kind of prompting people to do it. But once they give us a call, again, we'll put them in touch with one of our pre-need counselors or one of our funeral directors on staff, and they can sit down and start that process.
Okay. So you make it really easy, which is
We
nice.
we try to,
Yeah.
yes,
Again, people are weird about death. I mean,
they are.
it's an uncomfortable subject. We recognize that. But I love that you just make it, in fact, everywhere, anytime I introduce you to people, people are like, he doesn't seem like a funeral director. Like you're supposed to be like
I know.
Lurch or something. You should do
It's
that just
true.
as a joke. No, I'm just kidding. Walk in.
Maybe
Hello.
good evening. Good evening.
That's funny. All right. So another
And I
one,
smile all the time either. It's like,
I know, right? That's awesome. Well, you mentioned on our show
yeah,
last time, the first show. This is our second dialogues about death, which
yeah,
is exciting. You mentioned that this is really um, um, a ministry for you. That it's someone's,
yeah.
and when they're in that time of need. Can you expand on that a little bit in case someone missed that show?
Yeah, it just for me, it was a real calling. I've always loved to serve people in all the industries that I've worked in, and it's just when I was called to come back into this business, it was just really to help comfort people and to help them in their transition because losing a loved one is not easy, and it took me several years being in this business until I lost my dad, and then 8 or 9 years later I lost my wife, and until I really lost family close to me, I didn't really realize uh, how what people were going through.
Right.
I even though I was in the death care industry and I was helping people, I didn't really have that understanding, that innate inner feeling of what they were going through. And until I lost my dad, which I lost him kind of in a sudden accident, and then I
Oh,
lost my wife when she had a long-term illness. So I've actually experienced both types of death, a sudden death and a long-term illness. And so I can relate to families when they're going through those things when they come into our funeral home. I understand their emotions of how they're feeling under both circumstances.
right.
And that's what I think has helped me minister and to get people through those times of their loss.
Yeah, that's awesome. I
Yeah.
agree, Haley. Yeah, it's so wonderful, and it's sad that you had to go through something like that. But it did give you perspective. I think God doesn't put us through things for no reason, and
Yep.
the blessing in that is that you can turn around and offer that empathetic um, shoulder or whatever you
Yeah.
call it. Yeah, which is
Yeah.
awesome. Okay, so another thing is we talked about if someone passes away as a long-term illness like your wife,
Yeah.
or suddenly like your father. But what if
Mhm.
someone dies on? Okay, this is weird. What if they
Sure.
die on a cruise ship or a plane? Have you ever had that situation?
Yes, we've had both.
Oh, okay,
We've encountered both where
okay,
we've had somebody pass away on a cruise ship, and the cruise ship handles and holds that body. They have an infirmary. They have a place where they can hold that person.
okay,
And then once they get them back to shore, then we make arrangements of getting that person
okay,
and bringing them into our care. Another time we had a person, they were on a worldwide flight coming from like the Philippines to the United States, and they passed away on the airplane.
oh wow.
And and
Can
and
you
at
imagine the
that
other
time,
passengers? Like
yeah,
that's a
I don't
small
know.
space.
It's a small space, but they handled it. And then I had my staff drive to the airport. We took our vehicle onto the tarmac, and we actually went onto the airplane to pick up the loved one and bring them back into our care.
Wow.
And then the process just began. So it's a little bit different on both cases, and dealing with the documentation stuff is based upon the port of entry. So if they come in out of LA, even though it was international waters, the death certificate would become from the port of LA,
Oh,
or wherever their port of entry was on the airplane. That's how they would issue the death certificate,
okay. So
and it
why
would
did
be
that?
issued from the county of like the coroner's office, because since unless they'll look in doing some history, background medical history on the doctor, if the person had a physician, they'll talk to their physician. But since they didn't die into the in international waters or in flight somewhere, it'll be the death certificate would be signed by the county coroner.
Why is that? Why is that important? That where
Well,
it's
a death
signed.
well, it just the death certificate needs to be signed for us to do permits to allow the family to do burial or cremation. And so the death certificate is just issued from the county of where the person landed here in the United States. So if they land in Orange County Airport, it would have been in Orange County uh, Sheriff's Department or coroner's office would
Okay,
sign it. If it's LA, it'd be LA. If it's San Diego, it'd be San Diego. So
sure.
depending where the person comes in from their port of entry.
Well, what about if they die on a cruise ship going to the Caribbean? So they have to come in on the other side of the country. Do
Yep.
you help coordinate them being flown to California if they
Yes.
want to be buried
So
here?
So there's an item that we recommend to families when they're doing their pre-planning or pre-need, is it's called travel protection plan. And so they
Oh,
can pay a small fee. It's like a $300 fee. It covers you worldwide.
that's it?
Yeah. And it covers you. So what we'll do is then we'll call this company and they'll help contract funeral homes. Like if someone lived here in California, but they want to cruise in the Caribbean, then we would contract someone there in Florida to prepare the person to fly them back here to California. So
Right.
all the documentation, the death certificate stuff would come from Florida, would come from that area. Now, if they were international, if they died like in the Bahamas, then we'd have to get a death certificate in the Bahamas
Oh,
from their medical examiner. So if somebody dies internationally, the death certificate is going to come from that country or that county of where the person dies.
okay. Okay.
So, like for
Interesting.
people that pass away, like if you're in Mexico it'd be a Mexican death certificate because that's where the person would have died. So we get that death certificate from them. So it's
Okay.
only when it's in international waters like a boat or a plane and you're over water, then it's
Right.
going to have to be where the port of entry is. But
That's
if you're
interesting.
but if you die on land internationally, then your death certificate would come from the country or the city of where that person died.
Right. And I know this is probably a silly question, but um, not why do you have a death certificate, but when you get that back, right? Let's say it's from Mexico. What do you
Yeah.
use that death certificate for? Like, because I know
Well,
people
some
get multiple copies for banks and stuff. But I don't really know that.
sure. So death certificates are like a legal document that need to be used for transitions because you're no longer with us. So if you own property, if you own vehicles, if you have life insurance policies, stocks or bonds or investments, typically those agencies are going to need what we call a certified death certificate. And those certified death certificates are issued from the county of
Okay.
death. Now, if it's an international one, I would recommend families get a few extras because you're having to deal with another country, and
Sure.
getting more in the future would be difficult. So definitely always get a couple extra. Also, if your family member dies out of state, such as my dad died in Wyoming.
Okay.
So when he passed away, I ended up getting like 10 or 12 death certificates because if I ever needed more, I'd have to go back to Wyoming to get more death certificates.
Oh, smart. But do
So
you
it's
need them
always,
for like every bank account you need to close and all
you
that
need
kind of
them
stuff?
not for every account, but for every bank you deal with. So if you deal with two different banks, you would need two death certificates.
Got it.
If you have all your stocks and bonds with like a broker, like a Charles Schwab or Merrill Lynch, then typically you could just go to your agent and take care of giving them one death certificate for your whole portfolio.
Oh,
And then
okay.
typically maybe your accountant, your CPA might need one. If you have a family attorney, they might need one for your estate. So typically we recommend families anywhere get from 3 to 10 death certificates, depending on how their family situation is set up for death
Okay.
certificate. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, it's things
Yeah.
you don't even think about till you have to think about it, right? So
Yeah.
this is really great, Chris. Inquiring minds want to know. So I love
Absolutely.
that.
You bet.
All right. So we still have a few minutes left. And so
Okay.
I know that you have Thomas Miller Mortuary in fact, one of your beautiful funeral directors is here, Kathy, from your La
Morning,
Sierra
Kathy.
location, which is great. Hi, Kathy.
Good
Um,
morning.
she's a star, you know. We've been taking
Yes, she
videos of her.
is.
Absolutely a star. But you have Thomas Miller Mortuary in Corona, which is the
Yes.
longest established business in Corona, which is
That is still in operation today.
that is so awesome. And
Yeah.
then you have the La Sierra location, which is absolutely gorgeous. Like I went to
Yes.
visit it, like, and you said you did all the decorating of that.
My mom and I did all the interior design ourselves.
Wow.
Yep.
It's absolutely beautiful.
It is.
Oh, we have someone who came on. So I always tell families anything you're expecting money to be paid out to, you'll most likely need a certificate, certified death certificate. Oh,
There
that's
you go.
interesting.
So that one of my staff, thanks for helping me out this morning, Erica. It
Oh,
is.
that's right. Yeah.
So
I was like, wow, she
yeah.
really knows.
So a death certificate is any exchange of monetary, life insurance, property, vehicles, anything where you're exchanging. Since that person can no longer sign their name to a transaction, you're needing that death certificate as representation of them to finalize that transaction.
Got it. Got it. That makes
Yeah.
sense. So
Yeah.
you're right. So thank you, Erica. That's true. Anything financially, that's awesome. So we started to say that you have the Corona location, you have the La Sierra location, um, and you also have Walker Family
Funeral
Funeral
services.
Services, right?
Yes.
And that's right on Main Street. And so I know there's a little chapel at the Walker, and you have a much bigger
Yes.
chapel at Thomas Miller. So tell me a little bit about why someone would choose either location.
Sure. So each location has its own uniqueness to it. So our Thomas Miller location in Corona is our largest facility. So we can hold over 200 and about 250 people in our chapel there. So we can
Wow.
accommodate a larger crowd.
Right.
So our chapel is almost larger than several churches here in town. And
Wow.
so if a family doesn't have a location, they can have a nice gathering place at our funeral home there. Our La Sierra location in Riverside our chapel there holds about 100 to 150. So it's a little
Okay.
smaller chapel, a little bit more intimate.
Okay.
Newly remodeled in the last couple of years, so it's a beautiful little location. Has a beautiful little atrium, so then people, if they wanted to bring in their own food and beverage, they can have their own little food and beverage reception after that also. And then
Nice.
our Walker location is a storefront location. So our chapel there only holds about 35 to 40 people. It's a little
Okay.
smaller, more intimate. It's not a full service funeral home. So
Okay.
it's just what we call a storefront location. So it's just more simplified and no lower scale. So it just, for those families that just want something very simplified, they can go to our Walker location, and if they have a smaller family, they can have a little ceremony there of remembrance.
Oh, that's really nice. We also have Chris joined us today. Good morning, Chris. Thanks for coming
Good
on.
morning.
That's awesome.
Hello.
If you have any questions, Chris, let us know because Chris loves to answer questions on the fly.
Absolutely.
We really want to stump him. So, ask him something that's really hard. I
Nice.
love it. So, on that note, what if someone has a church and they want to have the service at the church? How do you assist with that? Your different
Sure.
organizations.
So when families come to us and we're putting together and coordinating their funeral services, and if they elect to have they are members of a local church, we'll call the church on the family's behalf, and we'll coordinate and setting the times and dates and locations for everything. So we try to relieve the burden off of that from our families.
That's
Um,
awesome.
we try to, and there are families that want to be engaged, and they will say, you know what, we'll take care of this, or we'll take care of the flowers, or we'll take care of the programs. But we're here to really do it all for families, because they should really come together as a family and grieve and support each other during their time of the loss of their loved one. And we're here to relieve all that burden off of them. But there are some people that like to control things, and we allow them to partner up and do those types of things too. So
Yeah.
it's just a matter of communicating. If the families communicate with us and we can get everything together, it makes it a nice relationship of working together. But again, our primary purpose at Thomas Miller Mortuary and Walkers is really to relieve the burden off of our families, so we can handle all of that. And my staff is just amazing to do all that. They're detail oriented. They love what they do. And it really, it's wonderful that I have a great staff that supports the families here in our community.
Yeah, I love that. On that note, we have somebody from your office asking, who's your favorite employee?
They're all wonderful. They each have their unique propositions that they bring to all of our families. So there's no one favorite.
You're so PC, but Rob has another idea here. He thinks
Oh,
he's the favorite.
well, that was like 10 or 15 years ago. Rob hasn't worked for me for years. But when he was here, he was a highly valued employee.
I love that. Well, obviously, Rob and Bill are in a little bit of a competition here. I love it. It's so fun. It's so great because seriously, when you come into your office, everyone is so like they're not uptight at all. Like they're just so welcoming, and they're actually for being in the line of work that you're in, they're really fun. I mean, they all have a great sense of humor, and it's lovely. And that's awesome. I think he's trying to say thanks, Chief. Also, Crystal said this is very informative. You are so welcome,
You
Crystal.
bet. Thank you.
That's
That's
awesome.
what we're
Yeah,
here
we
for.
just love it. In fact, Erica is it's Lisa says Erica is her favorite. I
Oh
love
boy.
we're just getting like a little going back and forth. I
Oh
love
my.
that. That's fantastic. I think the Christmas party this year is going to be a little crazy. Yeah.
Yes, I think
I,
so.
I love it. Okay, so our final question, because we're wrapping it up, we only have a couple minutes left to
Okay.
go. And again, I want to promote that our next show is on December 15th, same time, same bat channel, same bat time, 9
All
o'clock
righty.
on
We'll be here.
December 15th. Yep, it's Funeral Fridays on
There we
Friday.
go.
Um, oh, and Crystal just said, I love this. She said that Erica's her favorite because she invited her here today. I love that.
Oh, thanks,
Oh,
Crystal.
and Keisha, you get the prize. Thanks for being a great boss. That is
Oh,
awesome. So nice. Yes, and it's true, Kathy. All this information is really great. The public really needs to hear it. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to take all this conversation out of the shadows. That's why we're
yeah,
calling
we're
it
taking the
dialogue in the
skeletons out of the closet.
That's right. Oh gosh, now Rob is really trying to kiss you.
Oh boy.
I think they're trying to, maybe get an end of year raise or something. I love it. Okay,
Goodness
so for the
gracious.
final question today, We're
Yes.
talking all today about celebrations of life. And again, people can choose if they wanted to have a simple memorial. You
Yeah.
even have an on-site crematory. So if someone just wants to have, you also own Cremation Society of Southern California. So
Yes.
briefly tell people what that is. Again, it's kind of the most simple.
Our Cremation Society of Southern California brand is just for families that just want cremation and are really not wanting any sort of celebration. They're just wanting to just take care of a simplified cremation. And we do that. It's more of an online brand where people can go online and kind of do
Oh,
all of their information. And then they just follow up with one of our directors, such as Erica, Keisha, or Devon,
okay.
to finalize the arrangements. But a lot of it can be done through DocuSign and Adobe Sign. So it's just very simplified. So there's no
Right.
frills. And if people want extra things, then we itemize it out and it can cost more. But we try to just keep it to the basic, simple cremation.
So it's very affordable. And so like
It
just
makes it affordable for anybody.
like what would be the average price of just a cremation through the society?
The Cremation Society, right around $1,600 to $1,800.
Oh, so inexpensive. That is
Yeah,
fantastic. So it
yeah,
provides a really good solution to a lot of people who just want something really simple. I love it.
that is
But on
correct.
the opposite extreme, when someone really wants to make, and we've talked a little bit in the last show about some personalizations, about you had somebody who had a New Orleans band
Yes. Yep.
lead to the funeral side, which I thought was so lovely.
Yeah.
Is there another example to close up the show of how someone really personalized the funeral for their
Because
family?
I was trying to think about this the other day. I remember we did a service at the funeral home several years back, and the gentleman was really into NASCAR. And
Oh,
so my staff went all out, and they went to the store and they got all these like checkered fabrics and stuff, and we put out checkered tablecloths on the memorial tables, and we got all these checkered flags, and everything was done kind of in like NASCAR themed and a lot of cars and stuff like that. And we allowed the family to bring in a lot of their memorabilia. He had a lot of like helmets and jerseys and stuff like that. And so we decorated the whole chapel with all the flowers and photographs, and it was all kind of NASCAR. And his programs had race cars on it, and so it was really very customized, very personalized for that gentleman that just was enthralled with NASCAR. And so when everybody walked in, it was like, he finished the race with the checkered
oh,
flag. That was
nice,
kind of the theme. He finished the race.
nice. And of
Yeah.
course, your hearse probably could be, a race car, right? You could
Well, we could
just
probably
kidding,
put some checkered flags on there.
right? I love it. That is awesome. Well, we're getting so many wonderful. You have so many people coming on. Sissy even came on. That you're a great boss. So again, vying for the favorite of the year. I love
Oh
it.
boy.
And something else Rob said: his loved ones are in your care 100% of the time, and that's something else cool about you having your on-site crematory. Do
Yeah.
you want to say anything about that?
We'll save that for next time, Mary. We got to
That
give
is
it.
a great idea.
We're gonna tease everybody, and we'll let everybody know more about that next time about our on-site crematory.
You are so smart. Look at you. You're a pro
Ah,
already, Chris. Look at you. So wait.
come on
There's
back.
more.
That's right.
I love it. So next week we actually will. That's interesting that you said that because next week we're talking about burials versus cremation.
There we go.
And we're going to get into the nitty gritty and talk about embalming. We're going to talk about all the things that people really want to know but don't want to ask. So that's
Yes.
what this show is definitely all about. So I love
Good.
it. Oh, and well, Chris says hello to both of us. That is so kind.
Hello,
And
Chris and
says
Sarah.
yesterday, oh, you had a huge Dodger fan.
We did. We
That's
had a funeral yesterday of a family. He was a avid Dodger fan, and so I think the family must have asked everybody to wear their Dodger jerseys. So everybody had Dodger jerseys on yesterday. So
that is
we
fantastic.
try to do that for all of our family. We want to make it special and personalized for every family about any situation. That's what makes it memorable. That's what makes it kind of makes it a little bit more of a celebration, a little bit more lighthearted when instead of everybody dressed in black all the time. So we
Yes.
try to be a little bit more uplifting and doing things like that. Being a Dodger fan, a Laker fan, a Rams fan, we always, especially with all the sports teams we have here in Southern California, we're always having themed sporting events at the funeral home.
That's wonderful. And it really is, as you said, it's their finish line, right? They ended
It
well.
is.
The celebration is that they're going to be in heaven waiting for us to meet them someday. And so
Yes.
instead of making it somber, make it really a celebration of their life and all the things leaving about their legacy, which is awesome. So
Yep.
again, these are the numbers of the two, the Corona Chapel and the Sierra Memorial Chapel.
Yep.
But again, thank you guys so much. So many people came on today for Dialogues About Death with your host, Chris Miller. And we look forward to talking next week about burial versus cremation and all the nitty gritty on December 15th, Friday at 9 a.m. So if you have any questions, make sure you jot them down because we'd love to answer them live on that show. So
Right.
thanks again, Chris, for all this amazing information.
Thank
And
you.
we'll see you in a couple weeks.
Sounds great. Take care, everybody.
All right. You guys have a wonderful day. And we're going to say goodbye. All right. See you on the
Bye-bye.
15th. Bye.
Bye-bye.